Hello, and welcome to Creating a Culture of Respect and Civility. With us today presenting is Mike Powell. Mike is the Vice President of Organizational Development and Training for the Powell Consulting Group, a family-owned management consulting company located in Hyattsville, Maryland. A dynamic speaker and trainer, Mike draws upon the lessons learned from unique personal and professional experiences to help individuals and teams expand their capacity for success. Mike also sits on the executive board of the Trading Officers Consortium. So let's please welcome Mike to the session. Mike, I'm going to bring up your first slide, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mel. Thank you. Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone, or good morning. I noticed we have some folks from different parts of the country. So, whatever time of the day it is for you, wherever you are, thank you for joining us. Really excited about today's session. I want to also thank Mel for always supporting us with leading these virtual sessions that we've been doing. If you all are like me, you all have not been on a plane in quite some time, right? I'm sure many of you all had trips that you had planned this year and you had to cancel those trips. And so I, like you, have been missing out on my traveling opportunities. But just sitting here listening to Mel, I could close my eyes and imagine that I was on a plane, and now I feel comfortable. Mel taught me what I need to do to be prepared and get my cockpit all together and get everything going on. So thank you for Mel for getting us off to a good start and just getting my mind set to a place where I'm feeling comfortable and looking forward to today. Let me just start off by talking a little bit about where we came from and how we got to this point today. Many of you all may have been with us back in August when we had our kickoff to the program year. Actually, I think it was September. We had our kickoff to the program year. And that time, we did a session called Moving from Beyond Diversity to Diversity and Belonging. And during that session, we had a wonderful conversation. I brought my dad in, and we had a conversation about diversity and inclusion, equity, and belonging. We talked about the evolution of diversity thought in this country and how it has continued to change and evolve, and what it looks like for different organizations, and also what it looks like for us, even in our TOC community. That was the kickoff of our program year. And with our virtual program year in place this year and with the new design, we were supposed to do some follow-ups on that particular day. The follow-ups were going to be a roundtable discussion where we were going to do a roundtable and bring folks back to actually have a more in-depth conversation about diversity, inclusion, and equity and belonging. And so that was the plan. We had it all scheduled and everything looked good. We're really excited about coming back together. And then sometime in mid-September, around October maybe, President Trump came out with some regulations and directorates around offering diversity programming in the federal government. And he explicitly used the words to not offer training that was related to diversity. Certainly, training that emphasized putting people against each other and making people seem or feel that they were better than others. And though that is never the intention of any diversity programs, that directorate and that memo that came out gave us pause here at TOC. And many of you all, just like many of us, are federal contractors or federal employees, and we did not want to get ourselves in any hot water by running a webinar for federal employees that involved anything explicitly related to diversity. So we had some conversations, and many of you all were flexible with us, and we were flexible, and we delivered some other programs and some other webinars and kind of kept things on track. And then we started to have a conversation about, well, based on how this year is going, when we start to get into the end of the year, post-election and getting sort of comfortable in this pandemic environment, we may be back to that time when folks are starting to get back to their workplaces. And so what better time for us to have a conversation, not just about diversity, inclusion, equity, and belonging, but about what does civility and respect mean to us in our organizations. This has been a very, very divisive time in our country, with so much going on, with so many issues, social issues, health issues, security issues. And one thing that has forced us to kind of step back and take a look at what is going on is this pandemic has kind of put us all in our own little silos, right? We're at home with our families, or we're logged in with our teams, but we're kind of in our own little space, and we're watching the news and, whatever it is that you are really interested in, whatever values you have, whatever your likes are, the things that you do for fun. It's really magnetized during this time because we've all been in our own little silos, and can very easily forget about the perspectives of other people, forget about the preferences of other people, forget about all the difference that we have, and we're so comfortable and have gotten so used to being in these little pods that we have been in during this pandemic. But we knew that post-election and hopefully sometime soon, we will be getting back to that space where we are coming back to the workforce together, where we are renewing our relationships, where we are renewing what it means to work together, what it means to collaborate, what it means to get that synergy with each other. And so instead of talking about diversity and focusing on differences and how we can coexist and work together, and create the energy that we need to create the workforce and achieve our goals, let's get back into an organization and a space where we are thinking about what is civility and respect. So that's what we're going to do today. We're going to talk about civility and respect, how to create that in your organization. What can you as training officers, as learning officials, as training providers can do to help create the environment of civility and respect in your teams and in your organization. So let's go. So what is culture? When you all think of culture, what are some words that come up for you? You can just drop a few of your ideas or your thoughts in the chat box. When you think about culture, just what comes up for you? What is culture mean for you? Adele says, culture is about values and expectations, our norms. Great. What else? What are some things that come up for you when you think about culture? Norms and values. Good. The way of life. Good. Unwritten rules that guide processes. We do what we do and why we do it. Unwritten and written rules. Good. Hey, Angela. Language. Good. All of those things are a part of culture. On the screen, we have a definition of culture is the shared values, traditions, norms, customs, art, history, folklore, institutions of a specific group, individuals, teams, groups, or organizations, right? That is what culture, a really easy way that we describe culture to many of the individuals and organizations and teams that we work in is simply put, culture is the way we do things around here. That's what culture is. It's the way that we do it. And so what we want to do is take a look at culture, look at all of those things that you all talked about, the manners and the customs, the beliefs and the ideas, the ceremonies, the rituals, the language, the laws, the policies, the ideas, the ways of thinking, values, morals, arts, artifacts, religious beliefs, social institutions, all of those things that are about of culture. And so when we think about culture, how can we kind of put all of those things together and create this culture that is something that we feel good about? One of the challenges of creating culture, we often talk about leaders and their attempt to change culture here in the DC area. I don't know how many of you all are fans of the Washington football team like I am, but if you're not a fan of sports or even a fan of that team, you may be familiar with many of the conversations that you hear coaches and owners, general managers talk about in their sports teams is about creating a culture, changing a culture. And here with our football team here, there has been so much talk about changing the culture, and the team has gotten so much better over the past few weeks, and many of the players and coaches and analysts around the league talk about the change in culture. And one reason that culture can be so difficult to change is because if you look at your screen, culture shows up in three different areas in any organizational system. Right? Culture shows up at the individual level, right? What do I do as an individual? The values that I have from my family and my community and my neighborhood, right? There's a culture that I bring with me that exists for me every single day at the individual level. They're not the team or the group level. Within our organization, you have different departments, you have different geographic locations, you have different teams, you have different groups who also have their own culture. Yeah, you may work in the same organization, but the way that you show up can be a little bit different. I can be under the same umbrella, the same group. I can have the same mission, but my facility runs things a little bit different than this facility runs things. And so we have our own culture that is brought together by us and what we share and what our values are. And then at the organizational level, at the up high level where people are making strategic vision, strategic decisions and planning the vision and trying to achieve the mission of the organization, there is a culture that takes place that kind of trickles down throughout the entire organization. So when you're thinking about trying to create a culture, trying to change a culture, one of the challenges that many leaders and training officers experience is how do you create a culture that gets the best out of all of these levels? How do you create a culture that represents where I am as an individual, a culture that represents where we are as a team and a group, and it represents what we believe and what we value as an organization? And one way that we can begin to create that culture is have a foundation, just a baseline of civility and respect, right? So that no matter what you do as an individual, no matter what your family does or what your community does and how you were raised and what your beliefs and your values are, how your team shows up and what your goals are and your vision are, or maybe there's a organizational level where people are changing and ideas are changing and administrations are changing. But at the end of the day, at the core, at the foundation of our culture, there's some ideas about what it looks like to be civil and to be respectable. And so when we think about culture, let's do this really quickly. I'm going to challenge you. I have an activity called the 6-word challenge. When you think about culture, when you think about the culture of an environment that makes you feel good, a respectful culture, in 6 words or less, if you can just drop them in the little chat box that Mel just pulled up, in 6 words or less, describe what a culture of respect means for you. Just drop it right in the chat box. 6 words or less. When you think about a culture of respect, what does that culture look like to you? How would you describe that culture? On the screen, I value you, you value me. Genuinely caring about each other. Positive communication and safe work environment. Follow the golden rule every day. Chris says safety, reliability, honesty, openness. Sheila says respecting the uniqueness of all folks. Shanda talked about giving more than you expect, meeting others where they are. Great. All can be their genuine self. Absolutely. So we have an idea already right? We don't just come back into this organizational perspective with no idea about what culture looks like, what respect looks like, what civility looks like. We all have some ideas about what that looks like. And at an individual level, we all bring those ideas, those beliefs, those values, and those perspectives with us every single day. But even though we know, even though we understand and can describe what that feeling looks like, what it feels like for us, we've also probably been in environments where that culture does not show up, where respect does not show up. So if you were to think of some of the uncivil or disrespectful behaviors that you have experienced working in organizations, what are some of those things that have come up, that have happened? It could be certainly recent, or it could be, a long time ago. But just thinking about, some of those cultures that you've been a part of that has, had disrespect, or people have not been civil with each other. What are some things that show up in those cultures? Disrespect, gossip. What else? What are some other things that happen in cultures where there is not civility and when there is not respect? Good. Passive aggressive behavior, a lack of empathy, demanding, degrading emails, distrust, right? Favoritism, lack of transparency, right? Talking about each other, anger, frustration, verbal abuse, tension, right? Information hoarding. We could keep this open for the next 40 minutes, and we could probably fill out as many lines that we have on this poll, but we're not going to do that because we all have an idea of what that looks like for us, right? We all have been in environments where the culture is not one that is a healthy environment, where people don't say please and thank you, with something as simple as taking people's food from the office refrigerator, right? We've been at home, so if someone takes the food out of your refrigerator, you probably have a good idea who's doing it. But in the office, that can be a little disrespectful, blaming others, refusing to contribute, gossiping, spreading others, not cleaning up after yourself. These are all examples of what a culture looks like in a workplace where people aren't civil. There's a lot of research out there that talks about the impact of civility. There's some research that talks about how often people experience uncivil behavior, how often people are treated rudely, how often people witness uncivil behavior. If anyone is interested in getting some of that research, I can send it to you. It's Society of Human Resources Management has done a number of studies. Also, there was a pretty big study out in Baltimore a few years ago. But the statistic that stands out most to me is this last one, that 84% of people believe that civility would increase their personal productivity so much more. If you can be in an environment where you feel good, where you feel open, where you feel good about the relationships, you are more likely to be more productive. I don't know about you, and you all tell me. Have you ever been in a place where you enjoyed the work that you did, but you did not like the environment where you worked in? You did not like waking up and having to think about coming in to do the work every single day. And it's not because the technical work that you perform every single day was so challenging. It wasn't that it was so hard for you or that you were frustrated about the work, but it was something about that environment that just made you not feel good. I don't know if any of you all have been in that environment, but I certainly know that I have. And when I'm in that place, I don't feel good. I don't interact with people as much. And certainly my productivity goes down tremendously. So what we want to do is figure out how can we create a culture where people feel that there is civility and respect. So for the last 30 minutes of this presentation, I want to focus on 5 strategies that we came up with for creating a culture of civility and respect. What I like about these particular strategies as training officers, these are things that we have a very direct influence on and ability to impact. And so helping people to really get prepared for this culture. When we're coming back to the office, right? We don't know when this is going to happen. I know some of you are already in the office. Maybe there's a hybrid model where you're working from home a few days, where you're working in the office a few days. But certainly, our teams and our culture has changed, right? The way that we collaborated in the past may no longer be the same way. And I certainly know that with all of the tension that we have experienced over this year, again, whether you're talking socially, whether you're talking about politically, whether you're talking about financially, now you have people that are bringing all of the impacts of those things back to the workplace. And it's one thing to have those kind of pressures and being influenced by that environment when you're logged into a Zoom meeting or you're logged into an Adobe Connect webinar and you don't have to interact with your colleagues or your bosses or your direct reports in a very meaningful, direct way, but you are doing it virtually. So there's a little bit of a distance, a little bit of a barrier, right? But coming back into the workplace, we certainly want to remember what it feels like to be back into our relationships in person with people. And so we'll look at these 5 strategies. Let's start with, excuse me, increasing your interpersonal skills. We have to help people to increase their interpersonal skills. There's that saying that respect for others starts with respect of yourself. And so I know many of the training, many of the programs that we have offered historically have been technical training, maybe some self-awareness training, Myers-Briggs training, DISC training, similar trainings that help us kind of understand our personality. But what I think is important is, as Adele said, emotional intelligence, right? What's really important is to help people get prepared to understand themselves, right? What am I feeling? What is going on? What stories am I making up? How am I doing? Just giving people a chance to check in with themselves. I was teaching virtual courses, or I've been teaching virtual courses all year long. And it has been a really interesting experience to kind of check in with people and just say, hey, how are you doing? How are you feeling? This is a really difficult time. You may be home by yourself and you're used to having a lot of people around you, or you may be used to being around a lot of people and now you're by yourself, or you're used to having, all day to kind of get your work done, and you can go out and you can kind of engage with people and you can stop by people's desks, but now you're kind of by yourself, and just all of these pressures and frustrations and feelings that you have, and you're not sure what's going on. And then somebody says something that you don't like. Somebody sends an email that you didn't like how they phrased it, or you didn't like the tone, or there was something about it that bothered you, and it can set you off. And many times what we see is that people are in a space where they have so much stuff going on inside of them that they never even slow down to talk and process what's happening with them. And so they're bringing all of that energy into the workplace with them. And it can very well be unconscious, or it can be conscious, where you can watch the news and something on the news triggers you, or you can read an article, or you can see something on social media and it bothers you, and for some reason when you come into work the next day or when you log into your computer, you're just off. You're not feeling like yourself. You feel a little bit short, and suddenly you have created this environment that is not civil, that is not respectful, that could even be borderline toxic for other people. But it's because you have not stopped to really assess what's going on within. And so we need to get back to a time where our training, our skills that we are helping to develop in our staff, in our leaders, really gives people an opportunity to increase their self-awareness around where they are, what they're feeling, what they need. I was having a conversation with a colleague of mine who's an executive coach, and we were just kind of sharing some anecdotes about some of our coaching experiences. And she said, Mike, they hired me to be a coach, but I think what these people need is therapists, right? Because sometimes, coaching can feel like therapy. Sometimes people just need someone to talk to. And while certainly we can't all be therapists, right? We're not licensed to do those things, but I do think there's something valuable about slowing down and just processing what's going on within me, because I bring that into the environment with me every single day. Just because I walk into the office or I log into my computer does not mean that I stop being who I am. And I bring all of that energy with me every single day. So we need to give people an opportunity to feel that, to express that, to communicate that, to process that, so that they can be centered and coming into an environment where they are bringing good energy themselves and not poisoning the energy for other people around them. So we want to start with strategy one of helping people to increase their intrapersonal skills. And so some things that you all may want to consider. What are some of the behaviors that you want to remind people that they should be exhibiting, right? What are the behaviors that do you want them to build up? You want them to be bridge builders. You want them to be thoughtful. Do you want them to show empathy? You want them to take responsibility for conflict? Do you want them to compliment others and be respectful of other people's opinions and beliefs, right? Just taking some time to talk about what those traits are, taking time to highlight when someone is doing something that kind of reinforces the culture that we're trying to build or trying to recreate or we're trying to change, right? We want to take some time to give people some very, very explicit examples of what those behavioral traits are. The next thing that we want to do is, as an organization, we want to make sure that we are demonstrating respect, right? We want to make sure that we are demonstrating respect. A company's culture is a direct reflection of its values. And those values are related to the owners, the founders, the top leaders, right? So there's a saying that the people pay attention to what the leaders pay attention to. And so, you want to make sure that as an organization, this is at that organizational level of system, that we are doing everything that we can to make sure that the culture that we talk about, the culture that we express in our words, actually shows up in our behaviors. It actually shows up in the things that we do. It actually shows up in our processes, in our performance management, in our reward systems, right? We want to make sure that we aren't just talking about respect and civility as some ideas, but they're actually showing up in the way that we support and nurture our employees. And so we want to look at demonstrating respect from three perspectives. We want to look at it from a support perspective, from an influence perspective, and then from a community perspective. When we're talking about support, really simple. You want to make sure that your employees have the tools that they need and that they get meaningful performance feedback and that they understand how their performance is going to be managed. And when they are doing things the right way, that they can be recognized. There are so many times when we go into organizations and people don't feel good about their organization. They don't feel supported by their organization. They don't feel like they matter. They just feel like they're just a person who comes in that does a job and goes home, but nobody is really checking on them at a human level, checking on them at a heart level. They're just really just a cog. And so that environment, while we're trying to create this environment of support, of civility, of respect, of nurturing and encouragement, when I don't feel like my organization has my back, when I have a difficult time troubleshooting, when I have a difficult time getting access, when I have a difficult time getting information, when I have a difficult time getting training or getting clarity, I feel like you don't have my back because you are putting me in a situation that's setting me up for failure. And so if we can figure out how we need to support our employees, then we can figure out what we can do to let them know that we are supporting them and that they have the tools and the information that they need to be successful. And that creates a good feeling for them. So we want to support them. We also want to make sure that we give them an opportunity to demonstrate some influence. People want to know that their opinions matter. People want an opportunity to be heard. People want an opportunity to weigh in on things that are going on. People want to feel like they have some options. Right? We often talk about diversity and we talk about it in terms of a seat at the table, right? And that's great, right? We want to get people an opportunity to sit around the table and have a seat at the table, but it's not just enough to give people a seat at the table. We want to have people who give people an opportunity to have some influence at that table, to have a voice at that table, to know that their opinions and their beliefs and their perspectives, they matter at that table. How many of you all have ever been to a meeting and you sat there and you were participating and answering questions and really, really engaged, and then later on you found out that there was a meeting before the meeting that you weren't invited to? Or there was a meeting after the meeting where all the decisions got made and you didn't know about that meeting. You were never invited to that meeting. But that's really when all the nitty gritty goes on. And while you were kind of given this perception that you had an opportunity to influence, in reality, you really did not. And so how can we let employees know? How can we let staff know? How can we let teams and leaders know that their influence matters, that their voices matter, that their opinions matter, that we are really interested in what they have to say and the value that they're bringing every day? So we want to make sure that we're giving them support. We want to make sure we're giving them an opportunity to show some influence. And then the last thing is we want to give them an opportunity to build community. You know, community is something that's really, really, really powerful. Community, when people feel a part of a community, they feel empowered. They feel significant. They feel valued. And many times it is those small communities that go a long way to ensuring that the civility and respect that we're trying to make a part of our culture actually shows up. And so how do you give employees an opportunity to build community? Are there communities that are built around interests? Are there communities that are built around professional skills? Are there communities that are built around tenure and age? Are there communities that are built around some other dimension of our human experience, right? All of those communities that I'm a part of are typically communities that do something that make me feel good. I don't know if you all, if any of you all have been paying attention to Peloton in the stock market, or if any of you all have Pelotons at home or have friends that have Pelotons. And if you don't know what a Peloton is a stationary bike that has gotten really, really popular during the pandemic because people are scared to work out at gyms, or gyms are closed in their communities. And so these stationary bikes that come equipped with Wi-Fi so that you can connect to this virtual community has gotten really, really popular. But I've gotten, you have to have treadmills as well. I've gotten the treadmill. I've gotten the bike, and I really enjoy riding the bike. But what I've learned is that really the power of Peloton doesn't necessarily just come from the exercises that you're doing, right? It doesn't just come from the 15 or the 20 or the 30 minutes that you spend sweating on your bike and getting off. Really, the benefits that I've seen the most people take advantage of are the culture, the community, being able to log into a Facebook group or be able to text your friends and say, hey, we're riding today. Let's do this together. Hey, I noticed that you did that ride a little bit faster. I see that you lifted this weight a little bit longer. I see that you got a little bit more efficient. And now there's a group of people that even though I'm at home by myself looking at this screen, I don't feel like I'm alone. I feel like I'm a part of something that is bigger than me. There is a culture, there is a community that makes me feel connected, that makes me feel good. And when I can connect with these communities, that creates this positive energy that even as I come into the workforce and even as I have stress and tensions and all the worries that I bring with me every single day, there's something about this community that energizes me and makes me feel good. And so as training officers, we all have opportunities to figure out what are the communities that our people value and how can we integrate that sense of community into our workplace. Now many of you have been doing this for years. So now maybe the question is, how can you take that sense of community and create it in a virtual environment, right? Or how can we now reconfigure our workplace face-to-face environments to embrace the piece of the virtual environment that has seemed to build that community? And so we often have experienced the benefits of working virtually, but we want to figure out how can we experience those same benefits and take it to a face-to-face environment. And we've often experienced the benefits of building community in a face-to-face environment, but now the question is, how can we experience those benefits working virtually? And so as leaders and training officers, what we want to make sure that our organizations are doing is supporting our employees, giving them an opportunity to influence what's going on, and then giving them an opportunity to build community. Now, we have been working in this digital environment now for almost 12 months completely. We've been doing this sporadically for many, many years, but this year has been the first year where every single day you wake up and you know that I'm logging in and I'm going to connect with my team virtually, and I'm going to have a Zoom meeting or a webinar, and this is the sole way that I connect with my team. So in addition to creating that physical environment and the culture of civility and respect in that physical environment, it's really, really important to make sure that you define or refine what the digital standards are, right? Now with so many of us working virtually and in these virtual communities and virtual platforms and using social media, we have kind of gotten used to doing things a certain kind of way. And it may be a little bit different than it was when we were face to face. I'm sure many of you have heard some of the horror stories of experiences that people have had in the workplace as it relates to virtual teams and virtual meetings and virtual sessions and how that works. And so what's important is to make sure that we don't allow this digital environment, which many of us are used to and are comfortable with, but still collectively as an organization or as teams, we're still kind of getting a smoother understanding of how this happens, right? We're seeing things on social media, and how do we bring those into our virtual workplaces? Conversations that we have, um, stories that we share, anecdotes, all the things that have helped us to get comfortable being in this environment where we're working from home may not be the things that are appropriate for our workplace. And so it's important that we make sure people understand what is important, what is acceptable, what are the standards for connecting digitally, because there are organizations where people lose their jobs for things that they do on their personal pages, right? You have a personal blog or a personal podcast, or you go on Instagram Live, or you go on Facebook Live, and you say something that's offensive, and you think it's just being shared by your small community, your digital footprint. You believe can be really small, and next thing you know, somebody who is part of your professional network becomes aware of something that you've said or something that you've posted, and then it gets in your way of being professional, and it can even get you in trouble. And so it's important to make sure we talk about that with our folks, that we are reiterating what those standards are, because we get very, very comfortable with our language, with our processes, with our habits, and those things can very easily seep into our professional daily practices, and it may not be the right thing. So really quickly, just let's just think about it this way. Most of us have, good manners, and we have common courtesies and things that we typically do when we meet people face to face. We meet people, you greet them by their name, we say please and thank you, you hold the door, you shake hands, you use eye contact, but we're in a digital environment. So when you think about working in a digital environment, what are some ways that you can demonstrate common courtesy and good manners in a digital environment, right? We've all had experiences where someone has been on a call or on a webinar or on a virtual conference, and they're doing something that is not helpful, right? So what are the things that people can do that are helpful to make sure that in that environment they're demonstrating courtesy and good manners? Chris says, always be ready to give someone the benefit of the doubt. Provide the greeting in an email. Speak good morning, asking how you're doing. Showing patience. Good. What are some other ways that you all have seen to be effective in helping people to demonstrate respect and good manners virtually? Be on time for meetings. Good. Really, really important. I like what Chris talked about with giving the benefit of the doubt, because we're all in an environment that we may not be used to. We may have family around us. You may hear something that you wouldn't be used to hearing. Some of us may not be comfortable turning our cameras on all the time, right? And so, instead of judging people or getting frustrated or getting upset, you want to give people the benefit of the doubt for things that may come up in a unique environment in this virtual time. Allowing for space for people to check in before and after the meeting starts. Good. General politeness. Again, Sharmi mentioned rereading the email before sending it out to make sure you're checking the tone. Always check for clarification and not assuming things. Good. So again, we are used to showing up with common courtesy and good manners face to face, but now we're probably going to be in a hybrid environment where we have to do both. So we want to, again, just remind people, define and refine what our standards are and how they show up digitally. Number 4, during times of stress and uncertainty and change, embracing resiliency is really, really important. Earlier this year, we did a really amazing webinar on resiliency. Again, we are still in a time of stress. We are dealing with unprecedented times in this country. I mean, think back to March, and I remember saying, okay, maybe July, June, things will go back to normal. Then it was maybe like, okay, August, September maybe, and now we're almost at Christmas, and we're still in this environment. And as we all know, the holidays is a really emotional time for a lot of people, and so stress levels can be high during this time. During the the election phase. That was a period where on both sides there was just a lot of tension. There was a lot of stress. There was a lot of uncertainty. And so we want to make sure that we, again, are helping people to deal with those times. Again, sometimes I create this toxic environment. I'm behaving in a way that is less than civil, is less than respectful, because I'm just stressed out. I'm frustrated. I'm scared. Life is happening and I don't know what to do. I don't know if I can go outside and spend time with my family. I don't know if I can go to the grocery store. I don't know about this pandemic environment and when it's ever going to stop. And I'm just frustrated and I'm nervous and I'm tired and I'm scared and I'm bringing that stuff with me every single day. And no one is really stopping to check to make sure that we're okay. Stopping to make sure that we're good. Stopping to make sure that I have everything that I need, that I can be supported, that I can feel good about my environment. Many times the workplace is the only place where some people have to go to get their social connection. Some people come to work every single day to just be around other people. Yeah, they want to do a good job. Yeah, they want to perform their work, but they really want to put themselves in a place where they can get out of the house and they can feel good and they can interact and engage. And in this time where we're all working from home and in this pandemic environment, many of us don't have that. And so we want to make sure that we help people to understand what resiliency means and how can you be more resilient in this environment. How can you deal with change? Helping people to understand what change is about, how to deal with change. You want to help people to also understand in the moment, right? When we're having a stressful moment and I don't know what to do, how do I react in the moment, right? Oftentimes it's those in the moment situations that really cause us to be disrespectful or to be less than civil or to be a little bit more curt and rude to other people. So how do we deal with that stuff in the moment? So helping people to kind of remember what some of those strategies are can be really, really helpful. And then after the moment, what can we do after the moment? What is our support system? What are our expectations? What are the things that I'm telling myself? What are the stories that I've had that I need to check in to say, are these things good? Are these things not good? Are these things true? Are these things not true? But to constantly check in after the situation to kind of do a debrief to make sure that you have managed the situation in a way that meets your expectations and are appropriate for your organization or your team. How to face uncertainty. And then the last thing is we want to help people to elevate their cultural competence. We want to help people to elevate their cultural competence. So I know we've talked about diversity and whether we can use that word and what that looks like as we move into this new political administration in this new political environment. But what I found is when people operate from a place of civility and respect, when people operate from a place of good intentions, and they're demonstrating effective communication skills, respectful behaviors, they're showing a willingness to learn about other people's cultures, their values, their beliefs, when they are aware of themselves and they have knowledge of themselves and their backgrounds, their turn-ons, their turn-offs, and they know themselves well. Now we can get to a place where our cultural competence becomes elevated. And so a lot of the things that we may not understand, we may not agree with, can be managed better when we have more of a cultural competence and we are willing to learn more, when we're willing to communicate more, when we're willing to listen more. And so while we may not be able to use the word diversity, we can use the words of respect and awareness and knowledge and communication skills as a way to learn about the concepts and the spirit of diversity, right? That's really what this is about. It's about that spirit. You know, you can call it whatever you want to call it. You call it diversity, you can call it differences, you know, inclusion, equity, belonging. You can use any of those words, but really what we're talking about is a spirit of being a human and interacting with each other in a spirit where we can all create the environment where we're willing and able to do our best stuff. And so what training officers can do is to ensure that they're helping to elevate not just the technical competence of their people, but also their cultural competence. That looks like getting to know people of the different cultures, whom they're interacting with, and maybe erring a little bit more on the side of being formal. A lot of different things, a lot of different ways that we can learn about different cultures. I'm sure that many of you all are aware of them. And so again, the word is just about being intentional about increasing your cultural competence. So that is what we can do. That is what we can do. It is 12:55 and looks like we got right down to the end. But let's go back to the top 5. So again, the top 5 strategies that we discussed today for creating a culture of civility and respect is you want to make sure that you are increasing or helping to increase your people's intrapersonal skills. That's at an individual level. At an organizational level, you want to make sure that your organization demonstrates respect by ensuring that people feel supported, by ensuring that people have some influence, and by ensuring that people feel a sense of community. We want to make sure that we are defining or refining our digital standards. So as we traverse this in-person and virtual hybrid environment, that we are behaving in a way that's appropriate for both of those environments. We want to make sure that we're helping people to understand how to embrace resiliency during times of stress, during times of uncertainty, and during times of change. And the last thing we want to do is make sure that we're elevating our cultural competence. So that is just a quick presentation on what we can do as training officers to help create a culture of civility and respect. Again, this isn't something that can just happen overnight. We've been in this environment now for almost 12 months and it didn't just happen overnight, so it's not going to change overnight. But if you can begin to consider these strategies and think about how you can slowly begin to integrate them into what you're doing on a daily basis. Slowly begin to integrate them in how you manage performance. Slowly begin to integrate them on how you communicate with your teams at an individual level, at a group level, and at an organizational level. Then you can now have this culture that you want to create and it wants to be reinforced. And over time, it becomes the norm, and you don't have to use words like diversity, inclusion, equity, and belonging. You can integrate the spirit of those words into everything that we do. So thank you for joining us today. I really enjoyed it. I hope this was helpful. Here is my contact information. If anyone wants to reach out to us with any questions, if you want to get some of the research or you want to learn more about any of the training opportunities that we can help you learn more about creating this environment, please let me know. I think
please give us your feedback. We'll share that with Mike and let him know how we can improve this presentation. As he mentioned, we will post the recording and the slides in the archive section of the TOC website. But please, if you don't mind, give us a little survey, fill out our evaluation. You are trainers. You do understand the importance and the value of those evaluations. So we're going to ask you to take some time to do that. Coming up next, our next TOC professional development program will be a PDP symposium in January on cultivating motivation and engagement. And then we also have a free webinar on the state of Congress and the political impacts of the federal workforce in 2021 and beyond. That is our annual check-in with Congress, seeing what's going on with that. We're really excited about that one. That one is a free webinar, so please share that with your friends and your colleagues, anyone who would benefit from understanding a little better the state of Congress and its impacts on the federal workforce. Just a reminder, Training Officers Consortium is an organization that offers a professional development program for federal and government trainers. We have got a very long-running professional development program, so please take care of your own professional development and register with our program. We have more months to come of planned program, including a very exciting virtual annual institute coming up in April of this year. We've got some great things planned on that. As I mentioned, we will have a recording posted to the trainingofficers.org archive. So once that gets available, you can view that and other webinars that we've conducted over the last few years. That archive continues to grow larger and larger. So, that is it for me. That means that you are now released 1 minute early. Enjoy that extra 60 seconds of time. We hope everybody has a safe and happy holidays, and we will reconnect with you in the new year. So happy holidays, everybody, and happy new year.